most Gen Z men are on screens, way more connected than any of the previous generation.
You're not lazy, you're not weak, you're overstimulated.
From the outside looking in, that can look like you're just scrolling, but there's actually quite a lot going on in that digital world.
This episode is your intervention.
Willpower and discipline and energy as measured by brain glucose gets more drained by switching things.
This isn't hustle porn, this is survival.
Most ADHD is not neurological. It is a lack of focus training.
Have you ever wondered what masculinity even is in the modern era? Are you ready to move beyond the macho bully or the soy boy archetypes? I'm Marc, and this is the Men's Therapy Podcast. Together we'll explore how neuroscience, Jungian psychology, and Buddhist philosophy can transform your life, your marriage, and your business. Are you ready to deep dive into the minds of men? Let's begin.
You didn't run a marathon. You didn't build a company. You didn't even leave your bed today. So why are you so mentally and physically drained? So here's the uncomfortable truth. Gen Z men aren't lazy, but they're burnt out from doing absolutely nothing. And today we're going to unpack exactly why this is happening and how to fix it. I'm Marc, the host of Men's Therapy Podcast and the founder of Men's Therapy Online. Today we're going to be talking about Gen Z men and specifically the drain that the digital lifestyle and all the social things have on them. I think it's something that is not really understood by our culture and certainly not by their parents. So my hope here is to paint a picture of what a lot of Gen Z men are going through and provide some really tangible solutions to help build up some motivation. What I hear from a lot of the younger guys I work with is exactly that. They feel like they don't have motivation. They feel like they have a lot of brain fog, a lot of fatigue. They talk about, a lot of existential threats, feeling they're never going to make enough money. They feel like they're never going to be as strong as their fathers are. They feel like they're not going to be successful. And a lot of them struggle with body image, sexual dysfunction, and addictions, whether that be porn or gaming. I think those are the two biggest. I guess, vaping, nicotine is probably also on there. But Gen Z men are struggling. And on the other hand, they are also one of the most emotionally intelligent generations that I've ever encountered in my work as a therapist, even more so than my generation, the millennials. So they're doing some things right, but some things they really need to work on. And we're going to talk about that today during this episode. So the first thing is we're going to talk about this paradox of digital exhaustion. So it's no, we're talking about stereotypes here, but it really is no surprise that most Gen Z men are on screens, whether it be on their phone, their computer, their tablet, their laptop, what have you. They are way more connected than any of the previous generations. And from the outside looking in, that can look like doing nothing. It can look like you're just scrolling, you're just spending your time on TikTok. But there's actually quite a lot going on in that digital world. And for those parents out there, it is really important to try to understand what your teenager is going through, going into their world, asking them, what are they looking at on their apps? What influencers do they follow? What YouTube channels do they like? What do they enjoy on TikTok? Actually try to get to know the world, because there's a lot of diversity on there. It's not just the screen, right? There's tons of stuff going on in this digital world. So how does it fatigue you? Well, there's some great work by Cal Newport. The book that we're referencing for a lot of this is a book called Deep Work. And what they talk about is that, willpower and discipline and energy as measured by brain glucose gets drained not by doing things. Well, it does get drained by doing things. I should say that, but it gets more drained by switching things, right? The brain reconfiguring is what drains your willpower and creates brain fog way more than staying focused. So you have these Gen Z men, and I have to say also some of my generation millennials, that we pride ourselves on the ability to multitask. We talk about how good we are at doing multiple things at once. We can have, a TV show on, we can have watching a streamer on another screen, and then could be doing our homework assignment. And we take that as a badge of pride, but really, and this is, just biologically, it is extremely inefficient. And not only extremely inefficient, it is extremely draining. But it's this weird thing where it gets us hooked, because we have this dopamine drip. We're getting all these stimulations. If you have, call it 3 screens open, the TV, the computer, and then your laptop where you're working on your thing, you're getting at any point stimulated. You're getting that dopamine hit, that idea of like, yeah, I got, a good juicy nugget, way more than anything than just one input stream, right? So you're getting flooded with dopamine, but your attention is also rapidly cycling between these three different sources. And like I was saying before, scientists have found that that is what drains energy. So it creates this fatigue. So if you take that even to one screen, you take that to something like TikTok or Instagram Reels, where you're scrolling and every video can be something completely different. It can engage a different part of your brain, right? You can be watching a video on cooking and now you're thinking about, ooh, maybe I want to make that dish. Or you can watch a video of a hot chick and be like, wow, I really want to message her, right? Or you can watch a video about a hobby and be like, oh, I should really try that, this DIY project outside. Or you watch an informative video and be like, oh, I never knew that about meerkats, right? Like you are constantly switching what type of your brain is getting activated. And over time, that is causing an immense amount of fatigue and brain fog. So what does doing nothing really look like, right? Like I was mentioning, it's short form video content, Reels, TikToks. It's, going through different memes, it's porn, it's gaming, it's scrolling on things like Reddit. It's this idea of searching for a reward. We talked a little bit on one of our previous episodes about the Skinner box, this experiment that they did with rats where basically there was a lever and every once in a while when the rat pressed the lever, a treat would come out. And the scientists would, change the frequency and the randomness of when that treat would come out. And they found it took very little amount of treats to actually get the rat to keep pressing the lever. It's gambling, right? Like you keep pressing the lever and at some point you're going to get a treat. So the brain is like, oh, I need to just keep slamming this thing. And that's what the doing nothing is, right? It's searching. It's more like gathering, right? If you think of like a hunter versus a gatherer, right? It's a gatherer mentality where they're going out to the digital world. They're just upturning a bunch of rocks and seeing if there's anything good underneath them. So there's often very little or no reward because most of the stuff is they immediately forget, right? It becomes trash. There's no achievement because you're not really getting better at anything, and just creates a sense of mental fog. This total sense of worthlessness. And there's something where it hooks on to this, base part of the brain, the limbic system, but it doesn't, reward the prefrontal cortex. So you can be stuck. It can feel like an addiction, and you may have experienced this, right? As a listener, I know I have, where I'll be scrolling and there's a part of my brain that's saying hey, there's nothing for you here. Just get up, do anything else, right? Go to sleep if you have to, but get out of here. It's not helping you. And then my finger is still scrolling, right? It's still happening because there's always that other part of the brain that's oh, well, what if the next one, what if the next one's really what I wanted to see? And what if the next one really, gives me that dopamine? So you have, Gen Z that are overtuned to dopamine. And I will say it's not as extreme as people that are on stimulants, but it's comparable. So, there's a bunch of studies out there that, measure cocaine users, right? And they use amphetamines and methamphetamine. And what they find is that the brain gets overtuned to both dopamine and serotonin, right? It's like if you're supplementing it so much, it takes more dopamine to feel that sense of gratification and reward. So it's kind of counterintuitive, right? Because you would think if someone's getting flooded with dopamine, then they would feel rewarded all the time. They would feel like they are, feeling great and feeling good. But really, the brain builds up a resistance or a tolerance to it. So it takes more and more. You can see this in kind of classic addiction, this idea of, chasing the dragon, right? That you have to just keep getting higher. You have to keep, moving up, increasing dosage. And that's very, very similar when you look at phone and screen addiction, where, you're getting these spikes, but each spike doesn't feel in the same intensity, right? You build up this tolerance to a point where it doesn't hit anymore. And it takes more and more input, more and more stimulation to be able to get there. And what that can lead to is escalating behavior. So, for, again, some of the really common addictions, which I would say porn and gaming and nicotine, right? You have places where these kids are gaming for a lot longer because they're wanting to climb in rank, they're wanting to get more status, they're wanting to, win a bigger match or get more rewards in the game because the original, awe and wonder and mystery of the game has gone away. Now it's all about that achievement. Similarly with porn, you can see that, these Gen Z men are going to start looking for more extreme porn, right? More taboo porn. They're going to start doing their porn sessions will be longer. They're going to actually have trouble, in the long term, masturbating or coming to orgasm, right? The bar keeps going higher and higher. And what this does is it creates an extremely negative long-term impact on focus, motivation, energy regulation, because it's ultimately a dissociative effect. And what I mean by that, it's an effect that brings people out of the present moment, When you're in that scrolling, when you're in that sense of constantly chasing those dopamine spikes, you're not present to your body and your body's needs. So what's going to happen is you go into this kind of wormhole, and when you come out, you're drained. You've just had a bunch of different random emotions that you don't know how to process. You're not very focused because you've just been looking at things that are, a minute at most long. And there's a lack of drive because maybe you haven't moved around, you haven't exercised, you haven't even breathed properly. So there is almost like a hangover effect from doing this type of thing.
Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you wanted to open up, but you were afraid that it wouldn't be taken well? You ask yourself, what's the point? Nothing's going to change anyway. So you do what you always do. You push it down, numb out the pain with a drink, a night out, or pornography. I've been there myself, and I know that men lack the outlets for emotional expression, which is why I founded Men's Therapy Online, a healing hub for men's mental health. If you've been knocked on your ass or just crave meaningful connection, join Men's Therapy Online, a community of men who just get it. We offer individual therapy, men's groups, and powerful retreats, all led by licensed therapists. At Men's Therapy Online, we will help you to get back on your feet and take your life to the next level. Start your journey today at menstherapy.online.
To kind of go into this a little bit deeper, right? Like decision fatigue is what happens, right? It's this idea of, when you make so many decisions, your brain eventually just shuts down. And, I really want to say this to those parents out there that think your kids are doing nothing is what they're doing is it's like a micro decision, right? So every single time they scroll, every time they decide what to click on, every time they decide what website to go to, who to send that particular meme to, which person to snap, like that is a micro decision. I think to the older generation, those decisions might seem meaningless or they might seem, worthless. And, if I'm being honest, I'm sure that there is some level of frivolity to it, right? But it is a decision. The brain logs it just the same as any other decision. And over time, it starts to lose its ability to make decisions because it gets burnt out. You get that decision fatigue. And again, many of you who have worked a long day can have felt this. I certainly have, right? You get to the end of your day and you're like, I can't make a decision about anything. I don't even know what I want to eat for dinner. I don't know when I want to go to bed. I don't know what I want to put on the TV. I just need to crash out. So these teens are feeling this because they are making these tons of little micro decisions all day, every day. Also, the brain never gets to rest because if they're in this kind of constant technological spin, it's just creating more mental clutter. The brain, we find it takes a minimum of 7 minutes for blood to circulate and the brain to go into a more restful state. So if they don't have 7 minutes of boredom, right, or of silence, then they're not going to be able to rest. Their brain is going to be constantly revved into this place of, just stimulation. And what that causes in a lot of guys is, if you're in that for too long, you have what a lot of, Gen Z men talk about. They talk about having anxiety, right? Which is a state of being over-revved, maybe with a sense of fear or concern underneath that. And they talk about having ADHD, which is often this inability to focus that we're talking about. So, the problem here is that because there's an addictive pull to it, you have these guys that, even if they are doing things, which they do, I'm not going to, trash the whole generation, right? Like if they're working, or if they, are in college or university or something or socializing, they come home and they are legitimately tired because they've accomplished something in the real world. And they think that scrolling on their phone is going to be a sense of recovery, right? That it's going to be something that they do to relax, but it's not. It's actually the exact opposite. And that even though it looks like doing nothing, it is constantly draining on the brain and the body. So that's why not to do it. So let's talk about what to do, right? So it doesn't have to be all just doom and gloom because I don't think Gen Z men are screwed. In fact, like I was saying before, I see a lot of motivation in that generation. I see a lot of pro-social, behavior in that generation. I see a ton of emotional intelligence. I think y'all are going to be able to get out of this. And I'm so curious to see if there is a split. One idea that I see in the clients that I work with is it seems like there's a number of Gen Z individuals that are completely swearing off tech, where there are some that are leaning into it even more. It seems like there's going to be quite a big schism in that generation of what, they want to integrate technology into their lives or not. So what can you actually do? Well, kind of the main thing, again, very counterintuitive, is go to a low dopamine environment. So if you think of, the scrolling and the constant stimulation as high dopamine, go to the opposite, right? Sit outside on a porch or a balcony, take a walk around the block, watch a sunset come up. Finding things that actually are not that stimulating, that are not uncomfortable. I'm not telling you to go somewhere that's painful, but somewhere that's like just kind of boring, but nice, just like nice, sit on a park bench, watch the birds, like I said, take a walk around the block, finding things where the brain can actually down cycle. For those of you that want to go the extra mile, I always recommend meditation. I think meditation is a great way, which is, basically sitting still and doing nothing, right? I think also things like, if you have income, things like massages, spa days, times in, sensory deprivation tanks, things like that, right? Where you're just in a very low stimulation environment. Even just like laying down on your bed with an eye mask on can go a long way. And really trying to take in your breath, breathing intentionally. I think another thing that's important is light movement, right? And I'm not talking exercise, I'm talking movement. So that can look like walking, stretching, even just like moving around your home, right? Like doing some again, maybe light exercise, mindful movement, Tai Chi, any kind of mind body activity, yoga, something where the heart rate really isn't getting spiked, but you're starting to embody yourself. You're getting, the blood flow going, and you'll find that that's a lot more recharging than the phone, but it's boring, right? And that's the thing, right? It's like you're trading this sense of interest and engagement. Engagement is probably a better word, right? It's engaging, but it's draining, right? The phone. Whereas these other things are like a lot more boring, but they're actually renewing. It's also really important to kind of create these rituals and routines. I find that, I think humans in general, and maybe men more specifically, we really, really need routines. We really need routines. So that can look like, and there's tons of content about this online, right? It can look like, cold shower in the morning. It can look like, eating the same breakfast every morning, waking up at the same time, even hygiene routines, brushing your teeth, taking a shower at the same time, journaling, drinking a cup of tea. It doesn't actually matter what it is, right? I mean, of course, there are some that are healthier. You don't want to be, taking a shot in the morning, right? But it's more about that sense of predictability and focus. It is kind of taboo, but Cal Newport says this in Deep Work, and I believe it, where he says that most ADHD is not neurological. It is a lack of focus training. And what Men's Therapy Online can help young men do is actually train their focus. It is a muscle, and it's something that is not taken for granted anymore. In fact, it's the opposite. There's so many of these tools, technologies, platforms that are actively draining our focus that I do think it is on us as men to train the focus, to reject those things and find ways to train our focus. So that can also look like hobby or crafts, right? Things that require us to really do detail focused work and be there for a long time. I'm saying like an hour minimum, right? Just kind of be doing the same thing, gardening. There's 10,000 things that you could do, but I find it really, really helpful. So hopefully this is a little bit of a primer. We're going to have a ton of other guests that are going to be talking about this stuff and what Gen Z men go through. But please, if you're interested, reach out to us at menstherapy.online. We have therapists that work with young men specifically and can help you all to, dig yourself out of these holes, really confront these existential things that you're feeling rather than avoiding them, and start to get your brain back to a healthier place. We do want to help you, and we're here for you. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next week on another episode of the Men's Therapy Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. And don't forget to visit menstherapy.online to learn more about the work that we are doing to support and inspire men. Until next time, keep moving forward.